Your toddler is on the floor of the grocery store right now, in your memory, screaming like the world is ending because you handed them the blue cup instead of the green one. Their whole body is rigid. Their face is red. A stranger 2 aisles over is already turning to look. Everyone is staring. You are calculating the fastest route to the exit, doing the math on how many items are in your cart versus how fast you can abandon them. And somewhere in your chest, underneath the embarrassment, a thought is forming that you would never say out loud. What is wrong with my kid? For years, the advice has been the same. Distract them, stay firm, ignore it, and it will pass. Almost none of that explains what is actually happening in a toddler who falls apart over a blue cup. Here's what's actually happening. The toddlers with the loudest, hardest, most explosive tantrums are, according to a growing body of research on early cognitive development, disproportionately likely to be the same toddlers who go on to test with the highest cognitive ability. Stay with me, because the reason is not what you think. Let's start with the piece almost no parent has ever heard of, because it explains everything else in this video. In 1991, a group of researchers known as the Columbus Group coined a term that changed how psychologists understand gifted children. They called it asynchronous development. Here is what it means in plain language. In a highly intelligent toddler, the brain's thinking abilities race far ahead of schedule, while the brain's emotional regulation abilities develop on a completely normal, age-appropriate timeline. That gap between the two, the sophisticated mind and the still developing nervous system, is where the tantrum lives. Picture it like this. Your toddler's mind is already working overtime, noticing patterns, asking why 5 times in a row, building complicated little theories about how the world works. But the part of the brain responsible for managing big feelings, staying calm, waiting patiently, has not caught up yet, and it is not supposed to catch up yet, not for years. So when something goes wrong, a broken cracker, the wrong colored cup, a puzzle piece that will not fit, your toddler experiences it with the intensity of a mind that understands far more than their body knows how to handle. The intelligence is not the problem. The gap between the intelligence and the regulation is the problem. And that gap is often widest in exactly the children whose minds are moving the fastest. Now let's go one layer deeper, because this is the part that will genuinely surprise you. A Polish psychiatrist named Kazimierz Dabrowski spent decades studying highly capable children and adults, and he found something researchers still reference today. He discovered that many of the most intellectually advanced children share what he called overexcitabilities, a heightened, almost turned up to maximum way of experiencing the world. Sound hits them harder, frustration lands heavier, excitement takes over their whole body. Dabrowski identified 5 types, but the one that matters most for today's tantrum is emotional overexcitability, a depth and intensity of feeling that goes far beyond what the situation would normally call for. Here's the simplest way to think about it. This is not a behavior problem. Researchers who study gifted children describe it as a nervous system that simply runs at a higher resolution. More input comes in, more meaning gets attached to it, and more emotion comes back out. The same wiring that lets your toddler notice the tiniest details of the world around them is the wiring that turns a small disappointment into what feels, from the outside, like a full-blown disaster. Here's what that actually looks like in real life. 2 toddlers at the exact same birthday party. Both are handed a balloon. Both watch it slip out of their hand and drift up toward the ceiling. The first toddler glances at it, shrugs, and wanders off toward the cake within seconds. The second toddler stares at the balloon rising, and something in their mind is already racing through it. It is gone. It is not coming back. There is nothing that can be done. That entire chain of thought, in full, lands inside a 2-year-old body in under a second, and the only language that body has for a realization that big is a scream. From the outside, one toddler looks easygoing and the other looks impossible to manage. From the inside, one toddler processed the moment quickly and moved on, and the other processed it more completely, more vividly, and paid the emotional price for that depth immediately. Quick pause here, because the next part is the piece that finally explains why smart toddlers seem to melt down over things that seem, to an adult, almost laughably small. If this is already changing how you see your own toddler, subscribe right now, because what I am about to explain next is the one idea parents tell us changed their entire week. Here it is. Psychologists who study gifted children have identified a very specific and very common trigger, something researchers sometimes call the boredom blow-up. It happens when a bright toddler is asked to do something far below what their mind is actually capable of, wait quietly with nothing to think about, repeat a task they mastered weeks ago, or sit through a slow, simple explanation of something they already understand. To an adult, that toddler looks fine on the outside, maybe a little fidgety. Internally, their mind is racing so far ahead of the moment that the mismatch itself becomes unbearable, and it comes out as a meltdown that seems to have no obvious cause. Parents often assume their toddler is being unreasonable. What is actually happening is a fast-moving mind colliding with a slow-moving moment, and having absolutely no mature way yet to express that collision except through the loudest tool available to them, their whole body. There is one more piece to this, and it might be the most important one, because it reframes the very thing that exhausts parents the most. The same toddler who refuses to give up during a tantrum, who will not be redirected, who will not be distracted by a snack or a new toy, who locks onto their frustration and holds it, is very often displaying an early form of a trait psychologists closely associate with high achievement later in life. Persistence. Watch what actually happens the next time your toddler melts down over a tower of blocks that keeps collapsing. A less intense toddler tries once, gets frustrated, and abandons the tower entirely. Your toddler tries, fails, screams, and then, given even 30 more seconds, goes right back to stacking. That refusal to disengage, as exhausting as it is to sit beside, is the same wiring that later shows up as a child who does not walk away from a hard problem simply because it is hard. The toddler screaming because the tower keeps falling down is the same toddler who, given a few more years and a few more inches of self-control, will be the one who does not give up on the hard math problem, the tricky instrument, the difficult friendship. The intensity you are watching in that tantrum is not a flaw in their character. It is an early, unrefined draft of determination. Right now, it has no filter and no patience. In time, with your steady presence, it becomes one of the most valuable traits a person can have. So let's bring all of this together, because I know what you are actually wondering right now. Does this mean every toddler who has a hard tantrum is secretly gifted? No. And it is important I am honest with you about that, because this video is not about diagnosing your toddler in a grocery store aisle. Most tantrums are simply normal toddler development, a young brain doing exactly what it is supposed to do at this age. What the research actually tells us is something gentler and, I think, more useful than a label. It tells us that emotional intensity itself is not something to fear or fix. It is a sign of a nervous system that feels things deeply, processes things deeply, and is, in many documented cases, connected to exactly the kind of deep processing that produces sharp, capable, remarkable minds. So, if you are the parent of a toddler whose tantrums feel bigger, louder, and harder than anyone else's on the playground, here is what I want you to actually do with this information. First, stop apologizing for your toddler's intensity in front of other parents. That intensity is not a character flaw you need to explain away. Second, when the meltdown happens, resist the urge to immediately shrink it or shut it down. Get low, stay calm, and simply let them know you see how big this feels to them right now. You are not rewarding the tantrum. You are teaching a powerful brain, one piece at a time, how to eventually carry its own intensity. Third, look for the pattern underneath the chaos. Is the meltdown happening because they are bored, understimulated, or being asked to do something far too simple for a mind that is already racing ahead? If so, that is not misbehavior. That is a mind quietly asking for more. Here is what I want you to carry out of this video, especially on the nights this feels impossible. The toddler falling apart on your kitchen floor right now is not broken, and you are not failing them. You are standing next to a mind that is already working harder than most adults realize, wrapped in a body that has not yet learned how to carry that kind of intensity quietly. In the right conditions, with the right support, that fire becomes focus. It becomes drive. It becomes the very thing that will carry them somewhere extraordinary. If this changed how you see your toddler's hardest moments, subscribe right now, because every single week we break down what is actually happening inside your toddler's mind, backed by real research, explained in a way that finally makes sense. And if you know a parent who is quietly convinced their intense toddler is somehow doing something wrong, send them this video today. It is exactly what they need to hear.